Last week, President Trump gave his annual State of the Union message where he talked for a very long time. It was 108 minutes. It was a record setter. We're not going to spend 108 minutes going through the State of the Union address, but we're going to take some time today and talk about what it means big picture and what it means for our industry. Joining us for our conversation today is regular guest, perhaps our most regular guest, Doug Kantor, General Counsel with NACS. He's active on the Hill, been involved in the industry for a long time, and he's going to kind of take us through some of the things that went on in President Trump's State of the Union message. So first off, thanks again for joining us, Doug. It's always a pleasure to have you dissect an issue and tell us about what it means for our industry.
Well, first, thank you for having me on. I always enjoy it. I'm a little disappointed that I don't get equal time. I want my 108 minutes, and I'll just note that for the record.
Noted, and we may parse that out into multiple podcasts because 108 is a little longer. We don't have enough tape. So that's the problem. It's a technical issue today.
I think at 108 minutes, I would begin to bore myself. So no problem.
So let's, first off, we have this conversation with you every year about State of the Union. And the reason we have it is the State of the Union, it happens in February. No, it's not January 1st, but it kind of sets the tone for the year. And this year, as pundits always say, the most important year in our history, et cetera, because it's a midterm election and there's all these other things going on. But here we are roughly at the beginning of the year. Talk about the importance of the State of the Union and what it does, whether in guiding Congress, guiding legislators, teeing up campaign messages. Take us through the big picture with the State of the Union.
Yeah, I appreciate the question because the State of the Union fulfills a couple of different missions, if you will. One is making the president's political case for what they're doing well, what they have done well, or what they will do for the country. And a big piece of that is always giving support to folks in their political party, especially in an election year. So making that political case is one piece of it. One big piece of it, typically, is also setting the agenda for governing for the upcoming year. What's that vision of the future? What are the priorities? What are they telling Congress to do? Or what are they committing their administration to do? And those pieces of the puzzle can look very different. In the first category, you can have things like having the sympathetic guest, as we certainly did this year with, a former World War II veteran and giving them a Medal of Honor. Excuse me. There are those types of political gestures that are always a piece of the State of the Union. There's also a ton of jockeying around what goes into both political messaging writ large and certainly, and perhaps even more so, future looking, what are the policy priorities that are going to come out of the presidency?
And of course, I know reading about it every year, each cabinet secretary wants to have his or her signature issues mentioned. And if not, well, are they important? So when you talk about jockeying, there's an awful lot of jockeying to make sure it becomes part of the speech. Because if it becomes part of the speech, then it becomes part of the national conversation, at least for some level of time.
That's absolutely right. Now, this State of the Union and this president are a little bit different stylistically than most others. And what you saw in the Tuesday night State of the Union address from this president was much more focused on past accomplishments as opposed to future plans and policies than most State of the Union addresses. And so typically the jockeying tends to be around get my issue in there that we're going to do in the future to give it the political push for us to get it done. And they're just either because of this president, again, stylistically, or there was a strategic calculation that it was more important to talk about accomplishments than those future-looking policies. It was striking for people who pay close attention to these that things really were much more focused on, hey, here's all the great things we've done, and it was relatively thin on what's coming next.
That's a excellent point, because the State of the Union typically was like, think of it like the Daytona 500. It's the start of the season, and pretty much as soon as the president's done speaking, the next morning is on a plane somewhere and is pushing whatever those I'm going to do this moments of the speech and trying to move them closer towards a finish line, if you will, completing the Daytona analogy there. But it's very much the start of something. Let's keep up this narrative. And for this one, and we're going to dive into what is the continuation of the narrative when there is less of a here's 3 things or 5 things or whatever that you're going to see us do over the next 2 months.
That's right. This was much more conveying, we have one, we've already done it, and congratulations to us in the country for it, as opposed to here's what we're going to deliver for you. The interesting thing about that is usually the conventional wisdom is elections are about what you're going to do next for people. It's about the future. So that's part of why presidents, even election years, try to lay out the menu of here's what we're going to do for you. This administration, like I said, they are unconventional in a number of stylistic ways, and this is just one of them. They've taken a different strategic approach here.
So before we dive into the convenience-specific issues, I have to ask you, you're watching this thing, is it popcorn, or is it a notepad and pen and you're taking notes? And how do you play this? Is it work? How do you look at it?
Well, to be honest, for me personally, I tend to find that it works better for me to read the transcript the next morning. I do watch some of these and see a little bit about what's going on and observe all of that. But the real work happens when I've got the transcript and can sit down and go through it more systematically.
In under 108 minutes.
Yes, it does take less than 108 minutes and preserves my sleep time when I decide I've got a sense of the feel of the event. Then I'm good to go and can read the rest.
So let's dive into a couple things. And really, it's what was said and what was not said that I think is worth diving into. And we're only going to focus on convenience-related issues. We're not going to touch upon things that may be of interest to people, but not necessarily our industry. So we'll just keep it high level. And I want to start out with fuels, because one of the first things I saw in yesterday in some of the news summaries was about gas prices. Now, gas prices started the year below $3 a gallon. He had mentioned in his speech that in many places it's $1.99 or less, which I think is more aspirational than reality. But setting that aside, gas prices are around $2.90, and this is actually the time of the year when, because of the transition to summer blend fuel, there's usually that transition price-wise too that takes place as the formulations change and things get more difficult. And also, for the record, RBOB, which is wholesale prices, are about $2.20. They've really jumped up the last couple days. So that does not include taxes. That does not include distribution and retailer costs. So just setting that landscape there in terms of where they are now. But what it's saying is, if we're talking about affordability this year, the number one thing that people hitch their wagon to on affordability is gas prices. It is always an issue, even though consumers are telling us more recently that they look at stores a little differently. They want to go to the store they like, sometimes more than the one that has the best price. So let's set it up with fuels. What can we expect, since that was something that was mentioned in the speech and mentioned in the headlines the following day?
This president has really taken gas prices as one of the key report card type indicators of how successful they are being in keeping costs down for Americans. I think the other headliner really is grocery prices. There doesn't tend to be just one product in that grocery basket. Eggs, milk, beef, are things that rank pretty high on that, but gas is gas. And so that's always a big indicator. This White House has put a special emphasis on it. And, I will say, yes, the fact checkers and this president have a tenuous relationship. So there lots of them will point out where specific numbers are right or wrong or other things. But what's clear from the speech and from other remarks the president's made around it is that the White House wants to trumpet the fact that gas prices are relatively low and have come down. How much they've come down, we can set aside. They care about that indicator. And the administration has focused a lot on fuel supply, oil supply, in order to get to that place. Certainly, it was an outward part of the foreign policy discussion and the activity of the administration in Venezuela, in a way that most administrations are hesitant to say out loud. So that is a piece of the puzzle, but they're also very much in favor of domestic production. They've taken a lot of actions to favor liquid fuels as opposed to, say, electricity and electric vehicles. So there's a lot that the administration is doing that can help and have helped with respect to lower gas prices. There are some things that any administration can't really impact as much as most people think they can. I think there's a fun article you wrote in the past that continues to get clicks years and years later, that the president doesn't control gas prices. And I recommend the read to anyone because it's illuminating. But this White House will keep focusing on it and keep looking for ways to keep those prices down. One area in which that work has been collaborative with our industry was around tariffs, and the tariff regime affects lots of products around the world, but they were quite cooperative in trying to think through how to ensure they would not affect the pricing of oil and refined gasoline and diesel products coming in from Canada and Mexico when they put their tariff regimes in place. So that certainly is a part of the story there too.
And thanks for the shout out to Does the President Control Gas Prices? It is amazing. You type that into any sort of search engine, that's the first thing that pops up is ours. And I think it's going to be important to continue for NACS, for state associations, for other organizations, for members to be able to tell the story about prices, because you had mentioned the president's doing everything in his control to have a good gas price story. But if he wants them lower or the other side wants something different, the finger gets pointed at us. And we just have to be prepared to have that intelligent conversation using facts, talking about customers, talking about all those things that we've talked about over the last 15 years, that this is how prices are set. And there is no boogeyman in this equation. And this is how prices adjust over the years.
That's exactly right. And certainly, as we all know, rising gas prices are not good for our industry and squeeze margins. Lower prices are better. And that certainly helps in our conversations with policymakers and has helped in our conversations with the administration and the White House.
So we had talked about affordability with fuels. Let's go inside the store. You had mentioned affordability related to food. And of course, food service is a big component of food. It's 28% of in-store sales. But food in general, there's all these issues related to SNAP right now. The waivers related to what states are able to do with what is included and what isn't included, who gets SNAP, whether it's for consumers and also from the retail side, what are the stocking requirements? So there's a lot moving there. What are some of the big, broad issues that either were talked about related to food affordability, et cetera, and which ones weren't talked about, and that may be a good thing?
It's an interesting thing and a very insightful point, because there's been a lot of push in the food regulation area. In some ways, the food category is under scrutiny and maybe under attack from some of the Make America Healthy Again policymakers. Now, with respect to our stores, we always make the point that we don't decide what people want, and we don't sell things because that's what we want them to buy. We sell things because that's what they want to buy already, and retailers are trying to make a sale and are simply reacting to those consumers and their wants and needs. SNAP and that program and some of the restrictions and other things that have been happening there is really the leading edge of a push into much more aggressive food regulation generally. And it's a very difficult way. It's a little bit like the tail wagging the dog, because SNAP is a small part of overall food sales, and particularly in the convenience store channel, a very small part of food sales. A lot of our members feel like it's important for them to be in the program to serve the community, but you cannot upend how food is made, distributed, and sold through the tiny lens of the SNAP program. Yet some people try to do that, and that leads to difficult results. It was interesting in the State of the Union that the focus was much more on the affordability message within the context of food, and not so much on how to regulate how food is made and what people eat and those sorts of things. And that may simply be a reaction to the political climate that we find ourselves in. It may be partly a result of this backward-looking versus forward-looking issue that I raised earlier. That's not clear, but it did indicate at least a potential opening for us to try to have more of a conversation around what are ways that you can help make people healthy without regulating in a way that is untenable and hurts our industry and potentially their customers as well.
So let me go to a third topic, which is payments. Now, the year started with President Trump posting on social media that it's time to get the CCCA, the Credit Card Competition Act, over the finish line. Great news, great momentum. I suppose on some levels we're saying, or somebody might think, well, that was a perfect time for him to dedicate 10 minutes of his talk to the Credit Card Competition Act. But I'm guessing this is one of those things where the less said, the better. Let's work this issue. And there are banks that are working this issue that have the money that banks have. So if there's more attention given to it on a very, very high level, that allows them to maybe deploy more resources that they have. And that's probably an issue that we may not want to have had him talk about in the State of the Union, and that was the case.
So, look, the president's endorsement of the Credit Card Competition Act was a fantastic development hugely important, gave us great momentum, and gives us great confidence that we can get that legislation done this year. There remain lots of questions about exactly how and when that'll happen, which I would not talk about in a public forum, even if I had the ultimate answers. But if he had talked about it in the State of the Union, that would have been great from our perspective. No question about that. It was interesting that he didn't talk about a range of things in that area in terms of future policy. Again, it was much more focused on the past, but he didn't talk about the 10% interest rate cap, which has also been something that the president has endorsed. The one thing he did talk about in this area generally related to housing costs and trying to prevent institutional investors from driving up housing costs, but didn't get into other things. And I think that's fine given, like I said, the overall tenor of the speech was, here's what we've done, here's where we've won, et cetera. It has been great, frankly, working with the White House on this. The staff has been excellent to work with. They're real pros and know their stuff. And so there's a lot more to come on that topic. Notwithstanding the fact that it wasn't in the State of the Union speech, we're super pleased at the support from the president. And, there's just no one who has as much impact on this Congress as this president. And it's arguable that no one has had as much of an impact on any Congress, at least in many, many, many years, as this president. So that makes us, like I said, very encouraged.
So one more thing on payments. He put in his 2 cents on a lot of issues, but he did not put his 2 cents in on the 1 cent piece.
He did not. I do think that is an issue that will get resolved soon. We're very hopeful that it will get resolved soon. There's bipartisan discussions on the Hill about dealing with the penny and rounding the penny up and down so that the fact that they're not making any more can be dealt with in a sensible way. They're at the very, very fine, detailed points of getting that done. So we are hopeful and optimistic there.
So that is certainly good news, even though it wasn't something that was talked about in the State of the Union address. Final thing just to talk about is, I talked about fuels. We sell 80% of the fuels. Payments, obviously, a huge part of any business. Final point around labor, which obviously labor is essential to businesses. Was there anything that came up? I'll actually make it a little broader than labor. Businesses being able to hire and businesses being able to, any pro-business type of messages that came out of the State of the Union that you think bear repeating and watching for those in our industry?
Well, there were some interesting things that came up. In particular, the president didn't spend a lot of time talking about this, but did mention this idea of essentially retirement accounts for folks who don't have access to 401k accounts, and having some government matching funds. That's a really interesting idea, and one that might get some momentum out there, and particularly for small businesses that have some trouble establishing and maintaining benefits like that. Could be an interesting solution depending on how they put it together. So that was significant in terms of hearing it. There's always a labor supply question for our industry. Our industry is one that needs a lot of workers, employs a lot of workers, but also has a lot of turnover. And we have seen tightness in the labor markets for years now, really even dating back to the pandemic. That has been a real struggle. And I do think some of what's gone on in the immigration space could arguably be a challenge from that perspective. So one that we're always watching and trying to engage constructively to make sure that our industry can participate and get the workers that we need, There are some programs, for example, in the agriculture industry that allow some immigrant workforce to come in on a legal, organized basis. And there have been some proposals in Congress to have similar programs in other areas, including in the convenience store industry and grocery and some other similar ones, to try to take advantage of the same thing so that we deal with some of the labor shortage issues. And we'll see if we get some momentum on those types of items. But what we have seen the administration be very open to us on some other labor priorities, like the idea that franchises and contracted businesses don't both need to be held liable on labor laws and those kinds of things. There have been some legal confusion dating from past administrations that this one has helped to clear up, and we hope to do some more of that as we move into this year.
You had talked about our members' voices, so I have to end by having a plug for NACS Day on the Hill, which is March 17th and 18th. And just talking to people. There was a great article in NACS Magazine talking to somebody who'd never gone before. And the idea, I think most people think that, I can't possibly just walk into a congressman's office and have a conversation. I'm a nobody. I don't know what to do. It is the most amazing process to watch how NACS Day on the Hill, it's actually 2 days, so it technically should be called Days on the Hill. But the first day is spent educating people on the issues, putting together teams, and you are in a contained bubble where there are people that have done this for an awful long time with folks that haven't done it as long. And it is a team that works together, and you don't have to be an expert on every issue. You have to have a voice and you have to have a story to tell. And it's amazing the feedback that we get after going up on the Hill. As I said, it's March 17 and 18 here in D.C. area. The 17th is spent on prep, and the 18th is spent in Capitol Hill offices. Any more that I need to do for a plug for that?
I do appreciate the plug. And here's what I would emphasize to folks. I appreciate you raising the concern some people may have about their voices and whether they can really make an impact, whether anybody cares to talk to them or would meet with them. And the truth is, it is just the opposite of some of those assumptions. Members of Congress and their staffs are actually much more interested in talking to the small business folks who feel like they're not significant enough than they are hearing from the big businesses that have their own lobbyists and all those sorts of things. They really want to hear from those folks from back home who are just working hard every day and are helping build communities from the ground up. What we see over and over again on lots of issues we work on is there are lots of industries, in particular the credit card industry, that have far more financial resources than we have. They've spent hundreds of millions of dollars against us on just one issue, for example. But people's voices actually matter more. And so I would say to everyone in our industry, showing up for Day on the Hill or another fly-in, meeting with your member of Congress or their staffs back home in their own district offices, sending them an email or making a call, all of those things, and especially doing them at scale where you get employees to do that, get customers to do that. We have ways and tools to do that that we put out through NACS. Those things overcome the millions of dollars in spending that other industries throw at us and are just incredibly important. And if you just set aside 5-10 minutes a day to do that kind of stuff, we would be 10 times more effective as an industry if everybody was willing to do that. It would be amazing if folks would set aside that time. And we appreciate very much people taking time out of their busy schedules to come to Washington and do it, because seeing you in person and members of Congress knowing you're willing to come in person makes a big difference.
So go to convenience.org under events for Day on the Hill. There's also go to the GR tab, anything like that. Doug, we should advertise this as a 108-minute podcast, and then just sit here for the next 70 minutes and say, okay, we're going to wait until everybody listening does all these things you just told them to do, and then we'll wrap it up. And they'll say, 108 minutes. So, I booked for it, so I got so much more done. But we're not those people. We are just like our members. We're about convenience, and we're about making sure our customers have a good experience. So we'll conclude it right there, but we aren't going to conclude the conversation. We are going to talk to you more, Doug, about these issues and many others. When the president usually starts the State of the Union, the first sentence or two is usually the State of the Union is strong. So I'll play with that a little. I'll say the State of the Union analysis is strong, and that's because of you, Doug. So thank you for joining us once again today.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I always enjoy it.
And thank you all for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.